Well, Nebraska, yeah. Good game. It's Frank again. Here to read chapter 5. This one goes back into the blue-eyed section of our story with the older Douglas Jerrod, the one in the institution, crazy house. All that exciting stuff. So, let's begin. The Blue-Eyed, Chapter 5. Letters help in so many ways. Hey, orderly! I need to talk to the doctor. Douglas jumped up from his bed as the words from his grandson's partner went through his head. If only your old man could have gotten the drop on Jordan. They kept running a continuous loop in his mind. If only. Orderly, I need to talk with Dr. Scott right away. Orderly! Douglas frantically beat the inside of his door to his slice of space in his prison for the insane. He began to bang furiously and gradually more violent as the date went through his mind. July 31st, 1985. Things went wrong for my boy on his birthday. He pondered the thought for a few more seconds while he proceeded to pound on the door. 64, calm down. Dr. Scott is not here at the moment. Well, call him. I have something very important to discuss with him, and I don't want to forget it. So get me Dr. Scott. I'm sorry. Please get me Dr. Scott. If I go and give the doctor an emergency ring, will you calm down? Yes, I will. Just hurry. I need to speak with him right away. The orderly stepped away from Douglas's door and proceeded down the hall to the old rotary-style phone on the wall. As he picked up the receiver, he pondered to himself, how will 64 know if he really put in a call to Dr. Scott? He is all locked up and he can't see me, but I should try to get the doctor. No need to have 64 freak out like last time after he finished up the mental and moral battle. He dialed up the doctor's home phone number. The phone rang once before the other end was answered. Picking up the phone. Dr. Scott, how may I help you? Yes, Dr. Scott. One of your patients is requesting your presence as soon as possible. He will not calm down until he knows that you are on your way. Okay, give me a moment to get dressed and I will be on my way. Just take the patient to the rec room. It should take me 5 minutes. All right, will do, Doc. The orderly hung up the phone and went back to Douglas's door to tell him the good news. As he approached the patient's room, he wondered what might be going through this man's mind to have him so worked up to request an immediate consult with the doc. It must be something massive. While he stepped in front of the door, he finished his thought. 64. You must have something listening to you. The doc will be here shortly. The orderly opened the door to Douglas's room. He entered the room and lightly grabbed Douglas on his upper arm. He escorted the patient out of the room and into the hall, stopped to close the door behind them, and then directed the crazed man down to the rec room. He continued to explain where they were going while they walked. Dr. Scott has asked that I take you to the rec room to wait for him. So he is on his way? Yes, I called him and everything, like you asked. He said he will be here in 5. Thank you. Don't mention it. I just don't want you to get violent again. Yeah, that was pretty bad, wasn't it? Yes, it was. We don't need that. Well, here we are. The orderly opened the door and walked Douglas into the room. He directed Douglas to the same chair at the same table as yesterday. He motioned Douglas to sit at the table before he returned to the door. He walked through the open door and out of the room with closing it behind him. The doc will be here any minute now. As soon as the orderly spoke the words while he stood guard outside the door, Dr. Scott burst through the big swinging door and frantically rushed down the hallway. The briefcase that he carried jostled in the air as it went back and forth from in front of him to behind him as he sprinted. I hope I got here in time. There are no ambulances or cops, so it seems all right, he quickly thought before he stopped in front of the orderly. He hunched over and gasped for air. I came as fast as I could. Is everything still all right? Yes, everything seems to be in order. The patient just seemed very adamant about speaking with you, and rather than have him freak out like last time, I thought that I would give you a call. Dr. Scott looked into the room through the window in the door to see Douglas sitting calmly at the table. He opened the door and walked around to the same chair on the same side of the table as yesterday and sat down. He placed his briefcase on the table and scooted himself closer to the table. Everything was like the day before, except the doctor's suit was replaced by black slacks and a white button-up shirt. You can leave us now. Douglas and I will be fine. Thank you. The doctor looked up to the orderly and assured that he had it from here. The orderly closed the door and left the two to their business as he opened up his briefcase and rifled through the mess created by his run for the legal pad. He pulled it out of the mess of papers when he finally came across it. Then he pulled out a pen from his shirt pocket and readied himself to take note of what Douglas had to say. So, Douglas, what has brought us together this early in the morning? It happened again. I connected with the other life, the one that I spoke of. The doctor noticed something different about Douglas in this meeting, opposed to the first meeting. The man looked at him when he spoke. Even the way he talked was different. Instead of the man's real life, the man said, other life. So, it's not your real life, it's your other life now? That's kind of a long story. As I was going through the mind of the other person, I found it wasn't me. That, in fact, it was my grandson. Your grandson? How do you know that for sure? Dr. Scott asked curiously while he jotted down what Douglas said so far. As he wrote, he thought to himself that this man seemed to be really into his story. He seemed to really think that he was connected with his grandson. He finished up this thought right before Douglas's explanation. I know how it sounds. One of the crazies with another crazy story, but it is real. I connected with my grandson in 1995 and then watched him die. How did he die? In a police shootout. So the police killed your grandson? No, he was shot while trying to apprehend his man. See, he is an officer, not a criminal. I see. Douglas sat across the table and observed Dr. Scott judgmentally write what he just said on the notepad. How can I prove that I am talking what I am talking about? How can I show the doctor? He thought as he crumpled up the paper in his hand. That's it. I can prove that I was there. Here is the number to my grandson in 19 or here's the number to my son in 1995. Douglas gently passed the piece of paper across the table to Dr. Scott. The doctor retrieved the paper and unfolded it to reveal the number and the name. Fred, 404-3526. He then put the piece of paper to the notepad page with a paperclip. He looked up to Douglas again. Where did you really get that? I told you in 1995, but I can see that you really don't believe me. I want to believe you, but you must admit, it sounds a little crazy. Connecting with your grandson, then watching him die. It is real. I just have to do one thing. Do you have a pen and paper I can use real quick like? The doctor pulled out another pen from his shirt pocket and ripped a clean piece of paper out of the notepad he was using. He then passed them to Douglas as he curiously wondered what the patient would do with them. Douglas took the writing materials from the doc and began to write his warning letter. While Douglas wrote, he jotted down what he observed. So, what are you doing? I am writing a letter. Why? Sorry. Douglas replied as he finished up his writing. He folded the paper in thirds as to be put in an envelope. He then looked back up to the dock and peered into Edwin's eyes. Why is this man so close-minded to the idea that he had? Maybe because he's a psychiatrist. Do you have an envelope? Dr. Scott pulled out an envelope from his briefcase right after Douglas asked him. He wondered to himself about what this patient would be plotting as he passed the envelope to Douglas. I hope it is not something horrific. He continued to second-guess his actions while Douglas stuffed the folded paper into the envelope and sealed the envelope up. Douglas finished up the envelope with an address on the front and instructions for the postman not to deliver the letter until July 30th, 1985. Do me a favor. Could you mail this for me? Douglas handed the finished letter to Edwin. Edwin took the letter and checked over the address. Fred Jerrod, 532 Jackson Street, Grand Isle, Louisiana. He then turned the letter over and read the message on the back. After he finished, he put the mail into his briefcase. What was that all about? Nothing much, Edwin. Just a letter to my boy. An experiment, if you will. That was the reason for our meeting. If you will mail that, I will be eternally grateful. I will. Edwin replied while he packed up his briefcase. He closed the briefcase, stood up from his chair, and went to the door to signal that the meeting was over. The orderly came back to the door down the long hallway and opened it up. He walked through the open door, but not without reassuring Douglas about the letter. I will make the proper arrangements so the letter is mailed the way you want it. Okay, Douglas? July 30th, 1985. Split to the future. Okay. Fred's wife heard the mail slide through the mail slot on their apartment door. She walked over to the pile of mail on the floor, bent over, and picked it up. Let's see what we got today, she mentally stated as she began to sort through it one by one. Junk, Bill, an important letter for Fred. She handed the letter to Fred. What is this, baby doll? Beats me. Maybe a happy birthday letter? Fred shot Pam a strange look as he opened the letter. He pulled the contents of the envelope out, unfolded the yellow paper, and began to read. To my dear son, on the day, July 31st, 1985, there will be a man on your bus that will cause you harm. His name is Jordan Lee Cutter. When you confront this man, do not take your eyes off of him. He is armed and dangerous. Okay. Love you lots. Your father, Douglas Jerrod. After he read all the way through the message, he folded the letter back up and put it in his pocket. Was I right, babe? Kind of. It was about my birthday. So, yeah. Whoa. Chapter 5. Letters help. That was chapter 5. Thank you for your patience. Remember, Douglas Jerrod at Douglas Jerrod and SamsonPWillings.com to get all your information on Douglas Jerrod. And later on, farther and farther into the reading, you'll find out what happens. Till next time. Adios.